Good evening to everybody. Thanks for clicking on to the Saturday edition of Wknd's European Outlook. Before we continue with the video, you know the drill. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It would be much appreciated. Join me tomorrow, 4 p.m. for the live stream. It will be the 125th edition of the Global Weather and Climate, live from Mark Wknd Weather HQ here in Edmonton. We're going to be looking at the lobes of pieces of the polar vortex is going to be descending over the United States. How cold? Where's going to see snow? It looks as if we've got the model output suggesting snow all the way down to the Gulf Coast. How cold is the inauguration going to be for Trump on Monday? How does that compare to the historic averages and the extremes? We're going to be looking at that in the live stream tomorrow. We'll also be talking about the potential for stormier weather as a consequence of that cold driving south over North America. So I hope you're enjoying the content here in the channel. Lots going on. We do have a reasonably settled weekend that we are continuing to progress through at the moment. We've got an area of high pressure dominating the majority of Europe. We've got an area of low pressure bringing wind, rain, and mountain snow to parts of northern Africa. But we've got a lot of high pressure over the continent. That is drawn some cooler air and drier air up across much of the UK and Ireland. So underneath a blanket of cloud across the bulk of England and Wales, temperatures really struggling actually. Let's have a quick look at the temperatures at the moment here at the time of recording. And we're generally anywhere from 1 at Altahara, 5-6 Celsius around the Inverness area, 7-8 across the Central Belt, and then further south we're talking about temperatures around the freezing mark in quite a broad area of England as well as Wales. Milder conditions across Ireland and Northern Ireland at the moment. Looking at the continent of Europe at the moment, as of just after 6 p.m, we've got some reasonable chill, especially across central areas of Europe, the Low Countries, Germany, much through the central region of the continent. We've got the cooler air. We're starting to see a little bit of a trim back in the temperatures, while very mild conditions, record-breaking warmth all the way up into mid and north Norway, Sweden, and Finland. There's the UK temperatures in a more zoomed out way. Obviously, temperatures relatively mild down across southern Iberia at the time of recording. So this is the current synoptic situation according to ECMWF. You can see a lot of low pressure spinning away over the central North Atlantic with high pressure over the continent. We're drawing our air generally in from the south. That has been the theme all the way through the past week, where this day last week we had a temperature of -9 at Altahara following from a low of -18.9. Here at Mark Wknd Weather HQ, temperature today 10.5 as opposed to a high temperature of -2.2, coldest on record here at the site, albeit it's only a 2-year period of record. That follows a -10.6 during the early portions of mid-morning. Actually, really, the temperature bottomed out at -10.6. Then the temperature tumbled back to -8 that night. We at this stage last week we were without heat due to a frozen pipe outside. Very different story. We've had at least 2 highs above 14 this past work week, and southwesterly winds have been keeping us on the mild side of things. But further south, near the core of high pressure, we've had lighter winds and temperatures below average across the bulk of England and Wales. Putting on the temperature anomaly chart of the GFS, and you can see the cold across England, Wales, warmer than average across Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. If we look at the UK specifically, just to make it a little bit easier, look at the milder than average across Northern Europe. We've got the cold than average Germany, Low Countries, France, in the northern portions of Iberia here. So we've got a bit of a contrast across the continent. Let's look specifically at the UK, and you can see here, if we put on the temperature anomaly chart, is it going to show me the temperature anomaly? No, it's not giving me that option, unfortunately. In terms of rainfall totals, will remain fairly dry. It's been a very dry first half to the month of January. I was trying to think what month we were on there, but even all the way out to Friday the 24th of January. So this is a way out to the end of the upcoming work week. We've got many areas of the UK seeing very little in the way of rainfall here. So this is really becoming a very, very dry January across the majority of the UK. Stark contrast, by the way, to last month where we had the over 200 millimeters falling here in northern portions of Scotland, with a kind of drier south versus wetter north during the month of December. But it looks as if the majority of the UK is pretty dry. That may change, by the way, as we move through the final week or so of the month, and we'll get to that in just a second. But you can see here, if we go back to the overview chart, just want to show you real quick how things are looking from a synoptic point of view here. So this is the overview: precipitation, cloud, temperature, and pressure over the next 24, 48 hours or so. We're generally in a no man's land, if you notice. Not a great deal happening, largely high pressure dominating. We've got an area of low pressure, not particularly deep at 996 millibars between Scotland and Iceland, as can be seen here. We've got an area of low pressure moving down towards, say, northwest Africa, Iberia, even the Canaries. Going to see some unsettled conditions here. The reasons why is we've got quite a distinct fork in the road over the Atlantic. We've got a branch of the jet going north. We've got a branch of the jet going south. Generally, high pressure is dominating both, UK, Ireland, as well as the majority of mainland Europe here. And it's really the reasons for the fundamental change during the course of this upcoming week is based on the Arctic air that is going to be driving south. Now, interesting things going on actually. We've obviously got this stretched polar vortex at the moment, quite coupled. It's quite vertically stacked in terms of strata into the trope. We've got a stretching of the polar vortex with warming on the East Asia, North Pacific, Northwest North American side of the pole. We've got the core of coldest generally to the north of the UK and Ireland. That orientation creates a channel of cross polar flow connecting Siberia with North America. We're seeing that air getting travel across the top of the pole into the heart of North America. And you can see here off the GFS model, we'll kind of focus on the GFS in today's run. So generally speaking, quiet on the European side of the Atlantic, relatively quiet on the other side of the Atlantic. But that being said, if you look at the pressure chart, and we'll look at the 850s in just a second, you can see here that we've got a system riding along the Gulf Coast. We've got another system just off the mid-Atlantic coast here. But you can see the pressure really rising, and that is indicative. That is the footprint of an Arctic air mass getting driven south here when you've got the northerly flow indicative of the isobars pointing straight out of basically it's actually connecting Siberia with the south central plain states. Pressure rising into the 1040s and millibars. We're ushering in that bone chilling, very dry Arctic air into the heart of North America as we progress through this weekend. And then once we step into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, that's when things get particularly interesting. We've got an area of low pressure deepening as it moves out of the Canadian Maritimes here. That is going to reinforce the cold air over this latitude. We've got some relative milder to the south of that. And it's actually a system that we're going to see moving across the far south of Texas that develops along the Arctic boundary, which is going to be basically situated right on the Gulf Coast. And what it's doing is it's drawing warm subtropical air out of Mexico, out of the Caribbean, up against the Arctic front here. That is going to trigger some significant snow to places such as Houston, Galveston, Beaumont, and along that Gulf Coast, we could see a significant snowmaker developing here. Relatively rare event to see heavy snowfall right along the Gulf Coast of the United States. This is essentially the demarcation zone between subtropical and Arctic air. So it's pretty far south, as can be seen here, but we notice that we've got along this Arctic boundary the development of low pressure, and that is where we're going to start to see the jet stream becoming very, very powerful indeed as we move towards the middle portions of next week. All the while, we're going to start to see subtle changes taking place on our side of the Atlantic. We're going to start to see pressure decrease as we start to see the jet firing up and exit North America. So as we continue to play through this loop, the cold air that initially said to you was getting drawn out of Canada, out of the northeastern United States, that area of low pressure is then kind of dragging very bitterly cold air out over the North Atlantic at the same time, this area of high pressure, 1029 millibars over the subtropical Atlantic, we've got this dividing line, this gradient here between mild and bitterly cold conditions. That's going to then fire up the jet stream, and we're going to start to see that jet progress across the North Atlantic. If we look at the jet stream, you can see, in fact, we'll look at the jet stream in just a second, but this is the 850 temperatures. There's the bitterly cold air getting drafted in. We've got temperatures close to minus 40 Celsius at 850, moving into northern portions of the lower 48. So Minnesota, Wisconsin, through the Great Lakes, even possibly into the northeast. We could be talking about temperatures minus 30, minus 35 Celsius. But it's as we continue to progress in towards the middle portions of this week. Look at the gradient, very, very tight gradient between the plus 15 and minus 20 Celsius. That is where your jet stream core is going to become strongest and going to start to extend out from the North American continent. Continue to play through this loop here, and you can see these areas of low pressure developing rapidly as they approach the UK and Ireland. The question mark is going to be, do they curve to the north before reaching the UK and Ireland, or do they cut across right over the UK? It looks as if the GFS, according to this run anyway, shows Friday next weekend, 24th of January at 12 UTC. We've got a deep low centered just to the northwest of Ireland here, UK. We're going to see a very slight tongue of milder conditions moving in, but it's once that system then moves northwards, we're seeing that flow coming in on the backside of the low. So this is going to be Canadian air that's modified crossing over the Atlantic, and therefore I expect to see wind, rain, but also the potential of snow in the northern side of the UK. Again, depends on the depth and the track of these areas of low pressure. But that's not the only low. We'll have another one pushing through. Then we've got another following that, and then we've got a series of low pressure systems expected to then barrel away across the UK. And you notice that generally speaking, according to GFS anyway, we stay largely in the colder air, but it really is fundamentally important to remember whereabouts that the jet orientates itself and the areas of low pressure, how they behave, how they deepen, where the peak in intensity, because once they start to peak, they tend to want to turn northwards um, towards the North Atlantic and towards the Arctic region here. But all the while, if we go back to the here and now, you notice that we've got, it's not just one solid lobe of Arctic air getting driven south. We get that, but we also have reinforcing waves of Arctic air getting driven southwards over North America. That is going to continue to keep this active and powerful jet across the Atlantic, quite a flat jet at that. And this is one of the reasons why I thought that we're not going to necessarily see any Scandinavian high. Now, yes, you could have it for a short period of time. We may see cold easterly flow underneath that high, but because of what's going on the other side of the Atlantic with this dump of Arctic air into North America, down into relatively low latitudes, that strengthens the temperature gradient across the Atlantic, strengthens the jet as a consequence. And I thought the Atlantic is going to win the battle between any easterly versus westerly. The Atlantic was always going to essentially win, in my opinion, anyway. But nevertheless, this is a very interesting one. How we've got these waves of Arctic air coming southwards. That's going to fire up a very powerful jet. And if you notice here, by the time we reach Wednesday, 09 UTC, 22nd of January, we've got a jet stream at 214 kilometers per hour. Now that basically comes to 246 kilometers per hour, or miles per hour, sorry. In yesterday's GFS, it was indicating a jet core in excess of 287 miles per hour. I put that on both Twitter and Facebook last night. The GFS was indicating, we in essence could see 260 to 280 miles per hour jet strength as it exits North America sometime towards the middle portions of this week. So the deepening areas of low pressure is going to definitely become a factor. The question mark is how strong, where they're positioned, all remains open to question. So as we play through this loop here towards the middle portions of the week, you can see pressure starting to decrease, areas of low pressure kind of ganging up on the UK. We've got this very deep area of low pressure with a sharp gradient between mild to the south, bitterly cold Arctic air to the north of the system here, and that is going to then force the area of low pressure to rapidly deepen. Look at this here, 923 millibars. The good news is, with regards to the UK, is this is well out several hundred miles to the west of the UK and Ireland at the time it appears to peak in intensity. But nevertheless, we have a pressure down to 927 millibars. Notice here that as it peaks, it then takes a turn up towards Iceland and Greenland once again. But then this is kind of setting the stage, laying the groundwork for more areas of low pressure to run that south displaced jet here. You can see another feature moving in 963 millibars, 970, yeah, 963. It looks as if it's peaking according to the GFS. But then we've got another feature behind that as well, and it looks as if the GFS has all these systems kind of turning more to the north on approach to the UK and Ireland, which is rather interesting. Whereas a few days ago it was showing these systems moving across the southern portion of Ireland and the UK. But nevertheless, this is going to be a conga line of deep areas of low pressure that are going to cross over the Atlantic and affect the UK and Ireland with the strong winds and potential for heavy snowfall, but we'll wait and see. This is off the ECMWF, I beg your pardon. Let's have a look and see what the GFS is indicating in terms of the track depth of these areas of low pressure. So again, pressure decreases towards the middle portions of the week. Jet intensifies to plus 250 miles per hour. Then we see these areas of low pressure moving in. We've got a pressure at 927 millibars to the northwest of both UK and Ireland. By the time we reach Friday, 18 UTC, this system moves through. You see here some snow depicted on the chart as well, because we do have the colder air moving in. So although we've got a westerly flow, I want to emphasize the point, it's not going to be an overly warm flow or particularly mild. In fact, it could actually be quite the sting. We've seen that in 2013-14. We had one deep area of low pressure after another moving across the UK and Ireland, but really built the snowpack across the mountains of Scotland in particular, because Scotland tended to be on the north side of these systems. Those deep areas of low pressure largely affected England and Wales, if you remember back, and it was all thanks to phase 2, 3 of the MJO and factoring in the elongated, the stretched out nature of the polar vortex, the bitterly cold conditions driving south over North America. Remember, that was a particularly cold winter, and that was when the craze of the polar vortex term, it really started to hit mainstream media back in that winter of 13-14. So yeah, it definitely kind of has a flavour of 13-14 showing up, and then we'll have these more deep areas of low pressure moving across the UK and Ireland as we progress late next week, through next weekend, and then probably into the following week as we move towards the month of February. Speaking of the month of February, this is the CFSV2 for the upper heights. So we've got obviously quite a lot of blocking across northern central Europe at the moment here. That is having an impact, by the way, on the polar vortex. Look at North America and look at the depth of that trough. So we've got this connection between ridging over the North Pacific, northwest North America, all the way across to Greenland and the northern portions of Europe. This is sealing in a particularly notable trough underneath, driving south into North America. That's going to fire up the jet, and then what is going to happen is, as we go from week 1 into week 2, you can see here that the trough then gets shifted into the Atlantic with the presence of deep lows and strong jet stream moving towards the UK and Ireland. Still see positive heights over Europe, if you notice. That's rather interesting to see, but generally speaking, as this pattern progresses, it's all leaning towards one thing, and that being low heights over the Arctic, low heights over the North Atlantic and Greenland, positive AO and positive NAO as the MJO continues to rotate phases 2 and into 3. Looking at the polar vortex, this is looking at the GFS extended. This is the 10 millibar heights and the anomaly, so that's temperature compared to average. And the initial indicates that we've got cold anomalies here between the North Atlantic, Greenland, and towards the Asian side of the pole. We've got slightly warmer than average anomalies over Europe, and obviously we've got the strongest anomalies over the North Pacific northwestern North America, and you see the orientation between warmer than average, colder than average. You follow the flow, and that is where the air is traveling in between the two anomalous points here, and therefore you can see why this type of stretched polar vortex favors North America but doesn't favor Europe. If we continue to play through this loop here off the GFS extended, you can see that the PV really starts to kind of organize itself, bang slap over the pole, and essentially that would kind of not necessarily lead to a particularly cold February. In fact, we could see quite the opposite taking place. But you can see here that generally the reflection between 10 millibars up in the stratosphere versus the 500 millibars underneath, they're quite closely linked up, if you notice here, with low heights to the north, positive heights underneath. If we go back to the same picture here, this is towards Friday the 24th, so a week from now, we've got a pretty robust, pretty well organized, and polar vortex is centered close to the source region, which is over the top of the pole. So this is not a particularly good look. This would support more of a positive AO and a positive NAO pattern overall. And this is, like I say, the CFSV2 for the month of February. In terms of the CFSV2 weeklies, let's have a look finally at the temperature profile here. So this is for the upcoming 7 days. Let's have a look at the precipitation. We've not really looked at that in a wee while. Drier than average upcoming 7 days, and then the following 7 days, because all these lows moving in off the Atlantic, we've got wet than average conditions here for that period, which is interesting. In terms of the temperature anomalies of the CFSV2, we've got still slightly colder than average down towards the southeast, warmer than average elsewhere. The majority of Europe away from northern France, Belgium, possibly the Netherlands, is warmer than average. Into week 2, warmer than average, which is interesting. Let's have a look and see what the GFS is indicating here, because I'm not convinced that it's going to be a warmer than average pattern based on the amount of cold, albeit it's ocean modified. I'm not convinced that it's going to be a particularly warmer than average look. And you can see the GFS extended indicating that we have that below average across parts of particularly northern UK and across that region here. So this is the kind of upcoming 5 days, and then play it through here. All that colder getting driven across the Atlantic, below average temperatures across northern UK, slightly warmer than average across more southern areas. But Europe as a whole is looking warmer than average according to the model. So that's it for today. There's lots going on at the moment here. Keep it right here in the channel. Like and subscribe. See you tomorrow, hopefully at 4 p.m. for the live stream global weather and climate report. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Bye for now.